Great. Well, welcome everybody to EV Next 2023. Thank you all for joining. We've got a lot of people in the room today. Isn't that amazing? And I mean, we're going to take a little time to appreciate what a wonderful room this is, actually. These books are hundreds of years old. And thank you for the IET for hosting us, because, I mean, there is a lot of overlap of intent with the IET inspiring a community of engineers to create a better world. And isn't that just what we're trying to do today? ev.energy and all the companies that you belong to, trying to decarbonize the transport sector and eventually making a better planet. Thank you all for joining, both here and online. We've got a lot of people joining us online today. I'm going to start by introducing myself. I am Giulia Escher. I am the tech lead for the B2B and grid services team at ev.energy. Let's actually get into the fun stuff that you all want to hear. Most of you will be familiar already with what ev.energy does. We've started our journey back in 2018, where we set ourselves a challenge to change the experience of charging electric vehicles and owning electric vehicles. Because we all know there are some pain points along the way that we wanted to make smoother. And we did that by creating a software platform that will make charging simpler, cheaper, and greener for the drivers. Simpler because the drivers would have all the charging data they need in one app, both from the charging at home and outside their home. But also because they wouldn't actually need to manage anything, because ev.energy would take care of that for them. We would automatically charge the vehicles at the best possible times for the drivers, so when it's cheaper for them to buy the electricity, but also for the planet, so when the carbon is the lowest, and for the grid as well, thanks to all the initiatives that we've done with distribution network operators, utilities, and also at national level. And I mean, we're all acting in this space, in the EV charging space or in the energy sector, and we know how dynamic and how much it's changing in this few years and how much it will change in the next few years. And this is exactly what we want to talk about today. So what's happening in the sector now and when we're going to go next. And it's exactly how we're going to start with our first session on what's next for EV charging. It's going to be led by Goldsmith, our head of grid and data services at ev.energy. And as you can see, he's going to be joined by a panel of experts from BEAMA, BEIS, Flexitricity, National Grid ESO, and by our CEO at ev.energy. After that, we're going to have a second session led by our B2B Product Manager, Lukas Lukoschek, and we're going to talk about what's next for ev.energy. We're going to have Lukas, myself, and again, we're going to be joined by a panel of experts from our charger manufacturer partners, waEV-charge and Stevie Chargers. We're going to have question time at the end of each session. We don't have a huge amount of time, but so please note down any questions you might have through the sessions, so that then you have a few for after the sessions. If you're joining us online, we also have a Slido, which you should be able to access just at the bottom of your stream. And we're going to also have some networking at the end for the people that are here in London. Without further ado then, let's get started, and I'll hand over to Will. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that introduction, Giulia, and welcome to everyone here. It's so great to see so many faces, so many people here joining us in the room. I think we've got, looking at the people standing at the back, well over 100 people in the room today, and more than that joining us online as well. So thank you for taking the time. We've got a really exciting session here today where we're going to be looking across transport and energy and how those two sectors are really kind of colliding in the space that is electric vehicles. So much is happening in this space with EVs and with energy markets in the UK, and we're going to be having a bit of a reflection on what's been achieved so far to date. There's a lot of companies collaborating, lots of work being done in the policy space, so some time to reflect on the progress that's been made, and also to look ahead to the future and to discuss some of the exciting developments that we think might be happening over the next few years and the next couple of decades. The electrification of transport is a really key part of the UK's net zero ambitions, and as well as helping with achieving our climate goals, there's other big elements around clean air as well, obviously keeping our cities and towns cleaner. When we start filling our cars with electrons instead of hydrocarbons, there's an increased load, so there's an increased energy demand that's going to be happening on the grid. So a key question is, what will the impact of this be on electricity networks and on the increasing levels of renewable generation that we see being connected to the system as we rely more and more on wind and solar? And perhaps the key question that we want to ask today is, rather than this creating a massive challenge or problem for the grid, how can electric vehicles actually be part of the solution for a smart, flexible energy system? So without further ado, I'm going to be introducing you to the speakers, the expert speakers we have on the panel today. So starting with Rachel, each speaker is just going to give a briefly introduce themselves and what their organisation is doing to help further zero-emission vehicles.
Thank you, Will. So my name is Rachel Busfield. I work for the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero. The working acronym at the moment is DESNES. That was the organisation you probably better knew as BEIS. I have a small team of policy officials, and we answer policy questions about the electric vehicle smart charge point regulations. We look at consumer uptake, and we also look at innovation. I was excited to launch some £12.6 million of funding for the vehicle-to-grid innovation. Thank you.
Fantastic. So great to be here. I'm Nick. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of ev.energy. The key problem that we solve in the energy system is every new electric vehicle owner typically falls in love with their electric vehicle when they're in the showroom. They are fundamentally better products than internal combustion engine vehicles, but recharging electric vehicles is actually a big pain point. And so what we aim to do is we aim to make recharging as simple as possible, but not only that, we want to make recharging integrated with the grid so that electric vehicle owners who we see everywhere in the world, whether it be in Texas, Australia, or in Europe, who plug in at pretty much 6 p.m. everywhere, don't overload the grid at peak times, and we're actually using electric vehicle energy as a resource to help balance the grid and integrate more renewable energy into the energy system. I've been running ev.energy for the last 4.5 years, and I've been in the energy sector for the last 15 years or so.
Hi everyone, my name's Jeremy. I work for an organisation called BEAMA, with a trade association in the UK for manufacturers and providers of, let's say, electrical products and systems and services. We do a lot of technical work. We represent a couple of hundred or maybe 250 members across the electrification piece. Good to see so many members in the room today, actually, which is just great. I represent the quarter of BEAMA that's the most interesting bit, which is the behind-the-meter flexibility assets, basically. So I have a metering group, a smart metering group, and I used to work for DEC before it was BEIS, before it was DESNES, on the smart metering rollout. So that's my entrance into the energy world. And I have a smart buildings group. I have an electric vehicle infrastructure group, which ev.energy is a member of. And I also work with I work with members and providers of consumer energy data services. So very, very focused. We're inveterate electrifiers and very, very focused on trying to make that flexibility asset part of the solution rather than part of the problem.
Hello, I'm Alex Hart. I work at the electricity system operator. I'm guessing most people know what that does, but we plan and operate the electricity system. So from decades ahead, deciding how much transmission network we need, what sort of market arrangements we need, closer to real time, deciding outages you can handle over the summer to do work on the grid safely, and then closer than that, deciding how we're going to get through the next winter and the winter after that and how much generation you need for that, all the way through to how much flexibility to buy tomorrow evening, and then in real time, second by second, keeping the grid operating, keeping it balanced, keeping the lights on. The interaction between that and electric vehicles, I guess it touches in a few places, but the main one is in the flexibility, getting the flexibility from electric vehicle charging and using that to balance the grid more efficiently. There is a team within the system operator, which is the zero carbon operation team. We look at mainly the period 2025 to 2035. We've got two big targets we're aiming for. At 2025, it's being able to operate the system zero carbon for at least some short periods of the year. So the system clears as zero carbon, and we don't put fossil plants on the system to keep it stable. By 2035, the system needs to be operating zero carbon like that all year round. And so our team particularly looks at the capabilities we will have to develop in that 10-year period to be able to do that. Within that, I have a smaller team within that looking at electric vehicles and storage. So that's my bit, is working out the role of electric vehicles in operating a zero carbon system.
Hello everyone, my name is Emma Burns. I am Interim Head of Regulation at Flexitricity. So Flexitricity are a aggregator and route to market provider for all kinds of flexibility. So demand side response, batteries, gas peakers, and of course electric vehicles. So we have a trading desk working 24/7 who help optimize battery assets to secure the best revenues, whether that's in the balancing mechanism, so National Grid's main balancing tool, the wholesale market, or other flexibility services. And we work closely with a number of energy partners, including ev.energy, to access that domestic capacity in particular.
Brilliant, thank you very much, Emma, and all the other speakers. As you can see, we've got some fantastic expertise up on stage here today, and we will be doing questions later, so I'm sure there'll be lots of questions. You can start thinking about those. In order to kick things off, the first thing, everyone loves a good graph. I love a good graph, and I hope there's some other people in the room that may share that passion. We're going to start with a key question, which is why is unlocking flexibility from electric vehicles so important? And I was wondering if you could start us off, Alex. I think you don't even need to look behind you at the graph. It's quite a familiar one to you. And just explain what the outcome that different charging behaviours will have in the future in terms of the energy grid.
Sure. So yes, I'm quite familiar with this graph. It's from our future energy scenarios. It's from one of the 4 scenarios we produce. This one's the consumer transformation scenario, but there is a graph like this for all 4 of the scenarios. The scenarios we use to plan the system, understand what's coming so that we plan the system to meet that. There are a few particular numbers that we focus on. One of them is peak demand. So the point in the year when demand is highest, how high does that demand get? So it'll typically be an evening on a weekday in the middle of winter. And we need to know how high it's going to get because you have to size the system to be able to cope with that. You need enough transmission and enough generation to cope with that peak demand. So that's what this is looking at. And then what we look at in particular is, well, what contributes to that? What are all the bits of demands that contribute to that peak? And this graph's looking at the contribution of EVs to that peak demand. There are 3 lines. 2 of them are sort of hypothetical lines that we show effectively to show our working, so you can see how we get to the final line. The bottom one is what we think is going to happen, but the other 2 show kind of hypothetically what might happen, so you can see how the sort of stacks of flexibility add up. So the first line is if all the EVs were effectively dumb charging, if they just charged as soon as they were plugged in. If you had all the EVs, people come home from work and they plug in, what would that do to peak demand? And demand would grow very fast in that sort of hypothetical scenario. By 2030, you're up to about an extra 4 gig of demand. By 2035, I think it's 10 gig of demand by 2030. By 2035, you're up to about an extra 20 gigawatts of demand. But that's not what we expect to happen, but that's the kind of the hypothetical you start from to then do the calculations. The next one is, well, what if those electric vehicles are charging smartly? If they are somehow responding to signals that tell them not to charge at the times when that would be most unhelpful for the grid, because there is some sort of reward for them to not do that, what would that do? And we see that growing quite rapidly. So if you look, the 2 dotted lines diverge a little bit right now, because you are getting a little bit of that right now. But we really are in the foothills. It will grow very rapidly from here. By 2030, you've got about 4 gigawatts of demand reduced there over the peak. And by 2035, it's up to about 10 gigawatts. So that increase of 20 gigawatts gets halved by people avoiding the peak when they charge. On top of that, you have vehicle to grid. So you have power coming out of the battery into the grid at the peak. We're going to get onto later kind of different ways that might happen. For the purposes of FES, we don't look too closely at exactly what's happening, just the battery is discharging, and therefore the grid is not under as much strain. We see that coming a bit later. So it starts more slowly. So by 2030, there's not very much. We've got about 1 gigawatt in this scenario, but it then grows very rapidly from there. So by 2035, it's up to 7 gigawatts, and by 2040, you're up to 17 gigawatts. So by 2040, we don't normally, I don't normally talk about that far ahead because it's starting to get a little bit far for people to take seriously, but by 2040, we see so much vehicle to grid that electric vehicles are actually putting more into the grid than they're taking out at the peak. So by that point, they become a source of supply rather than a source of demand. And that's a very rapid transition. If you look at the shape of that graph, that curve is quite steep compared to things we see in our scenarios.
Thanks for talking us through that, Alex. I think, yeah, particularly just the whole concept that EVs could actually be supporting the grid at the busiest time of year over that winter peak. What we were saying earlier about being part of the solution, I think there's nothing that sort of describes or illustrates that better. I was wondering, Rachel, if you could explain a little bit about the broader benefits to flexibility and what this means, not just for the grid, but actually for everyday people, for citizens, energy consumers, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah, of course. And my whole team is about trying to understand and deliver maximal benefit from electric vehicle smart charging. But that did start from trying to understand what those benefits are to be able to communicate those. And we talk about 3 benefits, which we communicated last month in our electric vehicle smart charging action plan. So we talk about the benefits of the energy system that we've just heard about there and how that translates into the potential of lowering prices, electricity prices for all types of consumers, whether you have an electric vehicle or not, about its ability to make the electricity powering those vehicles greener by reducing the carbon content across the electricity system, and for electric vehicle drivers themselves to be able to access cheaper charging costs. So in terms of the internal energy system economic analysis, between now and out to 2050, all types of demand response across electric vehicle charging, heat pumps, batteries, we could see that, we estimate that to cut the peak demand by about 10%, which if you look at today's prices between now and out to 2050, that's between 40 to 50 billion pounds off electricity system prices. And that will translate to a benefit for all users. Yes, we, in a simplistic way, we try and describe it as being able to use the electricity system at its most efficient, rather than trying to design all the wires, transformers to its peak capability. We could be so much more clever about moving demand to the times where there's less demand from other types of electrical equipment. Or to moving it to times when there's abundant renewables. And it's quite a scary prospect, or exciting prospect really, that there'll be up to 10 million electric vehicles forecast out to 2050. And adding up all that electricity demand is such a high number. But when you think about it, vehicles are actually a great opportunity because they're so perfect for energy flexibility. I think there's a RAC stat that a lot of vehicles are only driven for about 4% of their life. So really, they're just so ready for delivering energy flexibility without any inconvenience to the consumer at all. And actually, you know, I can see the products and services that businesses are coming up with. Consumers are going to actually have a really great experience and great convenience from using these products. So yes, it's a win on so many levels, Will.
Yeah, a win-win-win. Lots of wins, yes, for everyone. Yeah, so just picking up from that, firstly, scary. This is a scary challenge. It's also very exciting. There's huge opportunity, and the benefits are going to be there for everyone. So yeah, that's really good to hear, and that's why we're all working on this kind of together. Before we kind of jump in a little bit more into the details of smart charging and the future of it and what might be happening next, we're just going to take a few minutes to actually talk through what smart charging is and what it means. So we hosted an event a year ago called the Smart Charging Summit, which Jeremy was speaking at as well. And we defined smart charging, I think, in 1 or 2 lines, very simply and straightforward. But the world has evolved and changed. We're now talking about things like bidirectional, V2X, vehicle to home, vehicle to grid. And so we just wanted to spend a few minutes trying to unpack that a little bit, which hopefully will then really enrich the conversation that we have afterwards. So the 5 levels of smart charging, we're actually going to start with level 0, which is unmanaged charging. So this is what Nick was describing earlier, people plugging in all around the world at 6 p.m, peak time on the grid. This is sort of the worst case scenario that National Grid have been modelling. We then come on to level 1, or grid-friendly charging. So this is consumer or customer managed charging. So people are some incentive to shift or delay your charging away from peak times, but there's still manual input required. This might be like setting a timer or a delay in your car. It's sort of called grid-friendly because it's definitely better than unmanaged, but at the same time, there's quite a few risks you can get around secondary peaks. If everyone sets a timer for midnight, then everyone's cars start charging at midnight. Then at midnight, National Grid in the control room have got a bit of a challenge on their hands. So it's a step forward, but definitely not ideal. The world in which ev.energy and kind of mainly operating today is level 1 and level 2. That's often called V1G, or one-directional demand-side response. So we've got smart controlled. The key difference of this is automated. So it's sort of a set and forget solution. You don't have to remember to set a timer. And as well as being automated, it's able to optimize for a whole range of variables. So for what wind generation might be doing in the North Sea, for what the wholesale electricity price might be, and all of that gets taken care of by itself. We're then starting to look at V1H. So electric vehicles are kind of a key energy asset that you might plug in at home, but then you might have solar power on your roof, or a battery, or an electric heat pump that has some flexibility. So with level 3, this smart cooperative charging, how can we optimize the EV charging, but also link that in with what's going on in the rest of the home, so we can align those things. And finally, levels 4 and 5, the world of bidirectional charging. So this is when the vehicle, as well as pausing and restarting charging, you can actually discharge with vehicle to H to power the home, and vehicle to grid, so to actually export that energy. The last scenario Alex was showing us, where you can actually be putting energy back onto the grid. So hopefully that's a good bit of context setting. We've then got a kind of a rough idea of maybe where the spread of these levels or technology types might be in the market today, and where they could be by 2035. So the next question I was going to ask is, what's been achieved today so far in the market in the UK? So where have we come from, where have we got to, and what are potentially some of the remaining barriers?
Do you want to answer that?
Go for it, Jeremy.
Excellent. So yes, lots and lots of wins. You're all going to get tired of winning, I think. The really, really amazing achievement that I can see for electric vehicle infrastructure is that we have managed to support a deliver a supply-constrained market for electric vehicles. And I think that that's something that we as infrastructure providers can be really proud of. So we hear a lot from National Grid and also from the ESO that, yes, we have it in hand, we have a level of confidence that is very high, that the energy system will be ready for expected levels of road transport electrification. And I think that, I almost want to stop there. I think that is just a fantastic achievement. I can't fathom how many hundreds or thousands of hours, of person hours, have gone in to delivering a rollout that supports a really pretty impressive take-up of electric vehicles. I will just come to something Rachel said just very, very quickly. When you were and the clue is in the name, so when you describe being the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero, obviously the other plank there is energy affordability and protecting the fuel poor and vulnerable. That's the energy trilemma, which was an old Ed Miliband thing, I think, when they first set up the Department of Energy and Climate Change. And that was taken on very, very hard by the coalition government, and those were the three main incentives, if you like, for the Department of Energy and Climate Change. The solution to those three challenges, security of supply, affordability, and decarbonisation, the solution to all of those is flexibility. And thanks to ev.energy and Flexitricity and so many of you in the room, what we're seeing now is the cheapest form of electricity is actually also the most secure and low carbon. And similarly, the lowest carbon form of electricity is also cheapest and most secure, and so on. So that's what we've achieved. That's what we should be proud of.
Brilliant, thanks, Jeremy. So thinking about electric vehicles and the energy system, in order to unlock that flexibility, we need energy markets that we can participate in. So, Emma.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably fair to say that most of the action has been in sort of innovation projects or innovative markets. So by that I mean kind of one-off or sort of limited duration markets. But I think we're at the precipice of EVs and EV flexibility becoming kind of business as usual. So what we have achieved, probably the most famous recent innovation in flexibility is the demand-side flexibility service. Demand flexibility service, or was the name wrong? Sorry, Alex. Which is a lot of you probably aware of. National Grid's first real foray into domestic capacity and procuring that flexibility over winter peaks. And it was really incredible work done by National Grid and industry to bring together this new service very, very quickly ahead of the last winter, where capacity margins were looking a bit tighter than we would have liked. I think then kind of other system operators, so distribution system operators procuring flexibility at the local voltage, the lower voltage levels, and through the flexibility tenders that they procure. I think that's really the start of EV flexibility starting to become sort of a BAU service and providing that locational upwards and downwards flexibility to DNOs. But with flexibility, it's never just about one market. It's always about the revenue stack. So it's how many different markets can you participate in, either at different times or stacking different revenues together. So I think going forward, we are definitely going to see a bigger role for EVs in the balancing mechanism. So National Grid's kind of biggest, deepest market for flexibility, and also the wholesale market. We've seen kind of the emergence of some flexible tariffs, certain suppliers, offering tariffs linked to the day-ahead price, sending a clear signal for EVs to optimize their position. So I think, we've achieved a lot, and I think we are so close to kind of getting EVs into the balancing mechanism, more active in the wholesale market. And I think this year will be the year that all starts to come to fruition.
Great, thanks Emma. So we've got now flexibility markets happening at a local level. We've got them happening at a national level. We're starting to kind of stack those and unlock value across both of them. We're slowly coming out of innovation into those commercial services. How are we then engaging? This is still quite abstract, I think. This is still quite innovative. How are we reaching electric vehicle drivers and actually enabling them to participate in these?
Is that for me again?
You can go.
Oh, Christ. I can't tell.
Well, we go Nick first. Let's go Nick and then Jeremy.
You actually do it. So.
Okay. I'll take this one. I agree with everything that's been said. We are unlocking flexibility, and flexibility is the key to solving the energy trilemma, and that is a really positive message that we can land. But to get flexibility unlocked, you need to get drivers participating in flexibility markets. And I think what we do a lot of thinking about ensuring we think with other people's support in this room today, we can get almost 100% of drivers participating in flexibility markets with basically zero effort from those drivers. All they have to do is come home, plug in their electric vehicle, and then smart systems and markets should all happen behind the scenes. And the electric vehicle owner is not inconvenienced in terms of anything that they want to do. They can get up the next morning and drive their kids to nursery, which is the frequent thing that I have to do, and rest assured that their electric vehicle is charged. And I think we are making really big strides and progress towards that. I think, Will, you described the levels of smart charging, so smart charging and then integrating that smart charging with devices like solar inside the home. We have a lot of customers and users who use our platform to put self-generated electrons into their electric vehicle, charge up their electric vehicle for free using zero carbon energy, and they just have such a smile on their faces when they do that, because there is no better feeling than charging your electric vehicle for free and doing it with your own self-generated zero carbon energy. And that's the transition that we're moving towards. And what we want to do is we want to make that accessible to every electric vehicle owner within the UK, the USA, everywhere that we're operating, so everybody can play a role in supporting the decarbonisation of both energy and transport. So it's quite positive, I think.
I've got my happy face on too.
Go for it, Jeremy.
What I think is so fascinating about this transition is, as Nick has just said, there are so many different paths to a low-carbon electrification. We talk about, and we don't talk about it enough, actually, but we do try to talk about customer segmentation. So there are companies like Amazon that have tens of thousands of customer segments, and they know how to market their products. Now, the energy industry doesn't have quite so many, but there are so many different paths. So I have a heat pump, but I don't drive an electric vehicle. I drive a petrol car. And I'm sorry. Today. Yeah, as of, and
we'll chat afterwards.
We'll talk. And I think what we see then is, and maybe I shouldn't have started with that anecdote, actually. So my background is smart metering, and I used to go around the country talking a lot about how the smart meter was an entry, that's the entry drug, if you like, into electrification. And I think for a lot of people in the UK, having an electric vehicle is the first big flexibility asset they will own. But that's not the case for everyone. So it's just brilliant, I think, to see there will be heat pump owners who go, right, I need to integrate this with the rest of my home. I'll get an EV. Similarly, more people, because EVs are sexier, flashier, nicer, more interesting, more flexible as assets than heat pumps, you'll get your EV first, and then you'll go, right, I think I want to electrify the rest. I can talk a bit later about the importance of integration there, but that for me is the solution.
Great, thanks, Jeremy. So we've got different solutions required for different people, and I think that ties in quite nicely with these 5 levels. It's not, I don't think what anyone is saying, it's not all going to be vehicle to grid, it's not all going to be just one directional smart. So that we need a broad range of solutions to meet a broad range of needs. Thinking ahead to the future vision, I'm not necessarily going to ask anyone to make predictions, but I guess where we're roughly at today is we've maybe got 40% of people starting to engage a bit in smart charging, the majority still probably unmanaged. We've got 500,000-ish electric vehicles now on UK roads. So when we're thinking to 2030, we're going to have over 10 million EVs on the roads. What do you think the makeup of this smart charging mix might look like? Open question to the panel, if anyone wants to go first.
I can have a go. So that's 2030s, did you say? Well, thinking of the consumers, I don't really care if they use the word smart charging. And now that the smart charge point regulations are in place, I hope that by then drivers are just used to the fact that they need to choose or use the default off-peak settings, or will have the energy tariff or demand-side response that's feeding those incentives to use the off-peak times. And that's probably going to happen even in the mid-20s. So by the 2030s, it's just going to be the normal way of charging your vehicle. And it's so exciting to see a lot more products coming out for the public. So we're not just focusing in on the drivers that have got the off-street parking. And then also through the latter part of the 2020s, I'm so hoping to see more vehicle-to-grid and vehicle-to-home, vehicle-to-building solutions, because I think that offers more flexibility for the grid, but also potentially bigger savings for the EV driver as well. And I can see that starting to be initially perhaps in the homes like Jeremy described, where you've got other home energy management technology to integrate around, and it's about saving money off your consumption and off your bills. But also the fleets, because they're multiplying up the value across multiple vehicles, I think that's maybe where we start to see vehicle-to-grid being used more, so that into the 2030s, again, that's much more widespread than its early days today.
Anyone? And are there any barriers to that vision, or any kind of key things that you think that we need to be focused on today to unlock that?
I think, not wanting to get into the weeds, I think one of the key barriers that we see is market-wide half-hourly settlement. So we have these great smart meters, these bits of kit, but the half-hourly data from those meters isn't necessarily being used to settle the market. It's not being used. Customers are still being settled off the back of profiles. So as Flexitricity, we see this as a really key enabling factor that is due to come in 2025, maybe 2027 if things slip. That will allow us to access that flexibility, and particularly in our role as an independent aggregator. So we are not primarily a supplier. We can access flexibility without being a supplier. And once everyone is half-hourly settled, we can do that much more easily.
So, as Rachel was saying here, with the smart charge point regulations, meaning that all private charge points installed in the UK should be smart capable, and therefore capable of operating at least between level 1 and 3, and the rollout of smart meters and market-wide half-hourly settlement, we've got a really good foundation there, really to work from. So the key now is just unlocking that and making it happen.
So I think what happens, Will, is you go from a situation where we are talking about consumer behavior, and one of the things we did with the smart metering rollout is we're saying we want to change people's behavior. And then it becomes, I hope, in the 2030s, consumer behavior is something that's changed, isn't it? Like, you don't think of yourself right now as a consumer with a behavior. Like, if you change the way you
just do stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. That is your unknown known, if you like, that the other in the Rumsfeldian category. So what I think we will see is people just doing it. So people who are engaged in their energy use, who look at their in-home display, who think about their smart meter, who know what market-wide half-hourly settlement, know what the acronym stands for, they will behave in a certain way with their flexibility assets. And people who don't know any of that stuff will also behave in a way that supports flexibility. They just won't know they're doing it. And that's the exciting thing about having multiple paths to the solution, because engaged consumers will be helpful. Unengaged or disengaged consumers will also be helpful. It's our job as infrastructure providers to facilitate that.
Thank you, Jeremy. I'm seeing lots of nodding from the panel.
I think Jeremy's summed it up really, really well. It is going to be a diverse future, and I think that's the opportunity for all of us to actually support consumers and create new innovative products and services that engage and delight those consumers in different ways. I fully expect vehicle to home to be rolled out as a replacement for backup power. In the US, for example, you go down to Home Depot, which is like the equivalent of B&Q, and you buy a diesel generator. And so now, instead, you just have your EV and you just keep your EV plugged in when there's a risk of a hurricane. That will definitely happen. And I'm sure there'll be new innovative products and services that come out all over the world that engage and delight customers. But I do agree that I hope with the regulations that we've got in place, we will have a foundation that's really, really strong that means that at the very minimum, everyone is participating in the energy market, whether they know it or not.
So we could very easily have the discussion all day, I think. But we're now going to just turn it over to the audience to have the opportunity to ask some questions. There's lots of hands going up already. This is super hard and challenging. The gentleman in front, if you could just very quickly introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's Nick Sutton. I'm product manager for BG Sync EV. So thank you. It's really interesting hearing all of your points of view on this. One of my initial questions is, for those who are, say, not so willingly participating in this flexibility asset in some of these higher levels, how is there this is a question to everyone really, but actually getting people's chargers connected to the cloud? At the moment, lots of products rely on Wi-Fi or 4G, and I feel that's like the actual connection method is something that nobody's really extending out and to cover the cost of. So whether it's like the government or whether it's, so at the moment, are we expecting everyone to use their Wi-Fi, or are they, going to be using 4G? And how are we going to see a completely connected range of products?
Well, I can have a go. I mean, maybe. We want to obviously set this up in a way that works for installers, so that it's really simple and straightforward to get kit installed in people's homes, that is smart and compliant. Yes, there is a shift. It has to be connected to be able to respond dynamically to grid signals. A unit that isn't connected is not able to respond dynamically to grid signals. So there needs to be some level of connectivity. Wi-Fi is one solution, Ethernet is another solution, 4G is another solution. There are pros and cons with each of those things, but I think the value that's created on the other side and some of the markets coming forward that like Emma's talking about actually create an opportunity there that then can be offset for consumers around, so if you have an increased cost of connecting your unit via 4G, then hopefully with the right markets in place, you can also participate in demand response schemes, and that can then net it off at least. I mean, certainly some of the consumers that we see save hundreds, some of them save thousands of pounds a year by smart charging their electric vehicle in the right way. And so I think it's incumbent on all of us to come up with those propositions that work for everybody in the supply chain to make sure that we see the vision, but we deliver it in the most efficient way possible.
Great, thanks. Was there anything you wanted to add to that, Rachel?
I was just going to make the point that kind of in my EV policy space, we've set regulations that kind of ask for that policy outcome, that it is internet connected. But actually your question is probably a level higher, and that's the responsibility of the smart energy team that are looking at how they deliver the flexibility from all types of smart appliances. But actually that does go hand in hand with the smart digitalization strategy. So even though I can't answer that myself, that's the place to Google and input your questions into that digitalization strategy. But it is fair to say that the electric vehicle charging we're kind of leading the field in terms of, and I hope we set a really good standard in terms of how to deliver smart digitalization.
We've actually got, on that comment, we've got a question from online, which is, what would your response be to the argument that the UK is getting left behind when it comes to charging infrastructure?
I'd like to answer that one.
Yeah, go for it, Jeremy.
When there is a very, very short waiting list or no waiting list for an electric vehicle, and when there is a waiting list for a piece of charging infrastructure, then we're getting left behind. But at the moment, this is a supply-constrained market. So there are not enough electric vehicles to meet the demands of motorists who want more vehicles. So we're not getting left behind. I would say, in fact, I'm going to stop there. We're not getting left behind. The car makers need to catch up with us.
I suppose if I could add to that, I mean, when we get the markets right, when we get the revenues right, there's a sort of sense of if you build it, they will come. So I think, once the revenues are there, we'd expect charging infrastructure to follow.
Great. Have we got another question from the audience?
Hi, I'm Dunstan Power from Versanetic. My question is, to what extent do you perceive the car manufacturers themselves are on board with V2X and V2G?
I'll resist answering this myself.
I can answer.
Rachel, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Actually, I'll refer back to a call for evidence we issued last year and just published a response to that last month. We set out a number of barriers which did mention that the vehicle, we do need more types of vehicle to ev.energy ready vehicle makes and models out there, and that was echoed by the people responding to our call for evidence. So I do see that's a barrier today, but I'm really hopeful in the fact that we have the CCS standard now kind of beyond development, and also great innovation around AC charging. So I hope that's one of the barriers that's starting to be broken through to enable more vehicle types onto the market.
Yeah. I would say that the infrastructure providers have worked very hard to develop integrated and compatible and interoperable systems for V2X, and there's a lot of work that still needs to be done, and I really hope that the vehicle OEMs are also taking that approach.
Anything you wanted to add?
Looking at me. No, I mean, I think I agree with everything that's been said. I think that there are a few barriers with V2X for widespread adoption. So one of them is a commercial barrier just around the cost of the charger itself, and then also having access to the markets to enable that to actually create value on the other side. That's sort of a business model and a cost question. There's also just when you deploy V2X, you then start cycling batteries a lot more, and therefore you need to figure out, well, battery technology probably, or the car OEMs need to step forward and actually warrant those batteries. And then I do think there is an energy market complexity. I think car OEMs are playing in this space really, really positively. And there's numerous vehicle to X projects that we're working on and multiple parties are working on. But energy is complicated. It's a complicated market to crack. And that's why we need partnerships to enable that to happen, and kind of why we're here today.
Great, thanks, Nick. So we're going to move to a slightly different question now from online. The question is, I'm an electrician. I get the problem coming on the grid. We're putting these chargers on the walls every single day. Is that not enough?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Is he saying we should... What?
I guess the smart charge point regulations meant that the kit, effectively, the charge point, should be smart capable. So because we're installing smart capable or smart ready equipment, is there really more that needs to be done, or as an installer, is your job stick it on the wall and that's it? Do you want to have a go, Alex?
As an installer, I guess, or I'd let someone else comment on the installing bit. I think there's more that needs to happen than just getting those on the wall. The market-wide half-hourly settlement that was mentioned is really important. I think I would like to see many more time of use tariffs, and the energy crisis has made that difficult in recent years, and hopefully as we come out of that we'll get more, but I think market-wide half-hourly settlement should really unlock that, and you'll see time of use tariffs becoming the norm after that, and similarly flexibility. But in terms of these sticking bits on the wall, I don't do that.
We're in this beautiful building, which is also obviously the home of the IET Installation Code of Practice, which is once again in a draft, because I was looking at it the other day. I was on a meeting with people here in this building. So I'd refer Anonymous to the IET Code of Practice for installation, and I would echo Alex's point absolutely, that we don't want to get into a situation where manufacturers are being told to hurry up and wait, which is to build these wonderful smart things before the market is ready. And I think Flexitricity, I'm going to say this, are amongst the leaders of providing consumer-facing markets. There are others as well, obviously. But we've really got to make sure that the market is there to support the smartness that this anonymous electrician, and I applaud her or him, is putting into homes, because that's essential.
Great. We're going to go to one final question, I think, in the room. I know a lot of other hands are raised, so there will be an opportunity to chat with the speakers as well after the session. Also, a big thank you to everyone who's asked all the questions online. We'll take those away, and where possible, we'll try and respond and publish responses as well. We're just running out of time a little bit.
So yeah, my name's Jordan from EVC UK. I'm an installation company. Currently, there's only a few chargers that integrate with these smart tariffs. There needs to be a more fair pay policy in the market because they've got the monopoly on it at the moment. So that's obviously the suppliers need to offer tariffs to actually incentivise more people to have these smart charging chargers and actually make use of the smart charging chargers. It shouldn't be, oh, you can only get the smart charging tariff if you have a certain type of charger. It should be all chargers. So I think that needs to be addressed if we're going to have a fair play and a smart charging grid, basically.
Yeah, wouldn't argue with that. Anyone want to?
I couldn't disagree.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't want to bang on about it, but I think this is where market-wide half-hourly settlement comes in, because that really kind of forces suppliers, it exposes suppliers to kind of real-time prices and gives them a bigger incentive to then offer those tariffs to customers. So hopefully in the next few years, we'll see that barrier come down.
So there are definitely things out there today. The demand flexibility service mentioned, DSO services, ev.energy launched Power in Action over the winter. So that there are opportunities to take part in smart charging, get rewarded, but the value of that incentive and the widespreadness, I think there's a lot more work to be done. Fantastic. So that's bringing the session to a close. I'd just like to, if everyone could put their hands together for all the speakers on the panel. And again, thank you to everyone who's joined us today in the room and online for all your great questions. And we really see this as starting a conversation rather than finishing one. So we look forward to continuing that conversation with everyone here. Thank you.
ev.energy's mission is to connect everybody to simpler, cheaper, and greener charging. What does that mean? It means that we want to charge electric vehicles when it's best for people, saving them money, but also for the planet and for the grid. And we want this whole experience to be very smooth and simple for every driver. How did we do this? Let me take you on the journey of ev.energy. We started out by creating a mobile app, our ev.energy app, that drivers can use to do exactly what we've said. So have greener, cheaper, and simpler charging. This was in 2018. In the meantime, we've had a few years, and a lot of things have evolved. We now have over 100,000 users of the mobile app around the world. It's 4.5 star rated, and we've been connecting all these chargers to simpler charging. But we haven't stopped there. We released last year a new feature of our mobile app that is solar charging. Because as you can expect, there is a lot of overlap between all these early adopters of electric vehicles and people that care for the planet and will want solar panels on their roofs. And so there is that kind of boosted our mission even more because with solar charging, people can they can use directly their solar generation to power their electric vehicles. So increasing that self-consumption and going back to that mission, making it even cheaper, even greener to charge your electric vehicle. So that was, and just to mention, the big plus for a lot of people, the solar charging didn't even need extra hardware because we got all these clever software algorithms that will forecast the solar generation. So a lot of people like a lot more access to this solar charging feature. Right, what was next on the journey? So we keep trying to make charging very simple for the drivers, but we recognize also that the drivers are not the only actors in this space. We got businesses that work around the area of EV charging. And that's why the next step was creating Pando. Pando is our business-facing platform that we launched last year that is directed at business partners and everybody that kind of works in the charging space. So we shipped Pando to manufacturers, distributors, installers, and they can use it to simplify their experience of their work for things like easily installing a charger, or remotely changing the configurations of charger, or upgrading their firmware, or resolving effectively customer queries, because they've got all this data about all their assets all in one place. And obviously, kind of help them apply and comply with smart charging regulations that we all know is a big topic in the area. And this is kind of where we've been so far. And now, today, as we probably have heard, we have this big product reveal, because our next step was looking at what is the next opportunity in this space, in this market for businesses. And we've identified this opportunity to be shared EV charging. So, as you know, the market of EVs and in general, the electrification of the transport sector is exploding. So many people are getting electric vehicles. And as EVs get to the mass market, the location and the behavior around charging is changing dramatically, because it's moving out of off-street parking and private chargers, because not everybody has access to those, to the cities, to buildings, to parking spaces, to workplaces. And that's why we need shared EV chargers to solve issues around, to solve challenges and harnessing the opportunities around, when I have a shared EV charger, who pays for the charging session? How do I manage that? How do I assign all these charging sessions to the right people? And how do I make this whole experience actually simple and not like a huge pain point? So we addressed this by creating our feature, our new feature, the shared EV charging in Pando for our business users. Who is this directed to? It's directed to both apartment and commercial buildings, but at the same time also workplaces and fleets. So let me take you through a little bit of detail on that. So for apartment and commercial buildings, and you can see a little video of how Pando works in the background, what kind of features do we have? So imagine you're a site operator, you own a site with a lot of, with multiple chargers in it. What do you want to do? You want to set up your site, you want to be able to authorize drivers, so send invites to drivers to be able to charge in your site. These chargers will be semi-private, so for example, these people can have an RFID card, or you can implement plug and charge so they can charge freely on that, but this will all be tracked in Pando and on the ev.energy app if the driver is an ev.energy app user. We have automated payments, so you want to track again like all the charging sessions of the drivers that charge on your site, and you can track that and automatically ask people to pay for their charging session on a regular basis. But also, and load management, because as you know, if you've got a site with multiple chargers, you might want to set a limit and make sure that the charges combined don't exceed that limit, so you can do that on Pando as well. But also, let's say there is the other side of the coin, which is the experience of the driver, as we always focus on the driver, using shared chargers infrastructure. So again, they will have access to that on the ev.energy app. And you know, an ev.energy driver, so a private driver, can also become, if you want, a site operator, because we can give the possibility to them to share their charger, their private charger, and use it and make other people use it. Let's have a look now at the case for business fleets and workplaces. So again, I'm a fleet operator. What will I want to do? I want to be able to onboard my vehicle, the vehicle in my fleet, integrate them with the software from ev.energy. And I want to be able to smart charge them, because I think it was mentioned before in the panel, there is a huge opportunity for fleets to do a lot of smart charging in V2G. And so they will be able to manage that, as well as obviously roaming, so have the vehicle, the fleets, charge on the go and be able to track that. And talking about tracking, carbon accounting and costs, as we've said before. And obviously, once more, all of that will also be able to be accessed by the drivers themselves on the ev.energy app, so it's all connected and kind of like closing that circle. So now I'm gonna, having presented on the shared EV chargers kind of basics, I'm going to hand over to Lukas Lukoschek, our product manager for Pando, who's going to talk you through a bit more of the experience of the installers as well, which is super important, and then invite our speakers on stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Giulia. I'm just going to get the clicker.
Oh, sorry, you don't need that.
And yeah, and I take the clicker. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you have heard a lot about how ev.energy, since its beginning, has been laser focused on improving the experience for drivers. Similar with this product, we will be laser focused on improving the experience for installers, because in a way, this journey very much starts with the installer. And we heard earlier a question posed online already, sort of fears around, does the whole smart charging does it actually make it more difficult, more time consuming for installers to install chargers? And we sort of want to eliminate that pain and make it as easy as possible for installers to bring chargers to Pando and then to enable them to do the shared EV charging for their clients. Part of how we're doing this is that we're actually integrating with third parties such as JumpTech or others that can then just automatically push their chargers onto our platform, so that the installer literally just has to put the charger on the wall and everything is being set up automatically in the background. Once the charger is in Pando, the installer has the capability to remotely configure the charger, see charging sessions, update the firmware. So gone are the days where when the customer calls and has an issue, the installer no longer has to go out into the field to sort of troubleshoot or change configurations, but all of that can now be done online. And I should very much say that this tool, Pando tool, is actually cross-compatible across all the different chargers that we're working with. So it's one tool where all these chargers can sort of live and can be managed from. We also have our stellar installer support that we've been sort of building up over the past 5 years that will also be available in the Pando tool. Actually, sort of, if you look at sort of the reviews online of like sort of what ev.energy stands for, quite often it is our support team that gets the most frequent mentions, just because they're such a big aid for installers, but also end consumers. And at the end of the day, we really want installers to sort of embrace this tool, and we want to help installers boost their sales. So we sort of see Pando as partially also a sales tool to help installers accept new jobs that maybe previously they couldn't have accepted, because the platform increases the capability of chargers and allows installers to sort of upsell their customers, businesses, apartment building owners, sort of mud situations, fleet owners, that previously installers had not sort of been able to work on. So enough said about sort of what we've built. Let's hear about it in practice. I would love to bring onto stage Joe Fogel, who is the CEO of waEV-charge. Welcome, John. So, John, you've been one of the early adopters of Pando. Before we dive into Pando, maybe tell us a bit about your business.
Thank you. So waEV-charge was born in March of 2022. Our core focus for inception was the house builder and developer markets. So part S regs came in, which came in July of August. It was to create a charger which was a nice, clean and simple install, and could be carried out by not only our own approved installers, but also the contractors installers themselves. Quickly after inception, we integrated with ev.energy, which not only gave us or only assisted us with being fully smart regs compliant, but also widened our reach to the B2C domestic market. Fast forward to where we are now with the integration of Pando, we've widened our reach further to the commercial market and work with various different commercial car park installers as well as domestic.
Fantastic. And yeah, you've been one of the first people to lay your hands on sort of the Pando shared EV charging experience. We actually have a slide up here about a project you just commissioned. Tell us a bit about that.
So Pando, so Toshi is described as the deliverer of the luxury fashion industry. So it's a same day courier company essentially for high-end fashion brands. What they wanted is 19 charge points within a public car park, so it's within Westfield, White City. that they could not only have secure charging, so they would have an RFID card, but also be able to monitor it from the back end. So they have, each one of their drivers is allocated a charger. They can monitor when they're charging, what it's costing them. It also, back office, if there's errors and issues with chargers, they can monitor it all via that. And Pando was the perfect fit.
Fantastic. Joe, tell us a bit about sort of looking into the future. How do you see sort of, what role will Pando play for your business growth?
I mean, really, as I say, when we launched, we really were focused on the house builder market. And although it's obviously certainly a growing market now with Part S rigs coming in, it's also quite a niche market. So for us to now completely widen our reach and have a commercial offering, along with mixed-use dwelling solutions, so for residential blocks of flats and apartments, as well as having a tool now to offer to our installer partners that they can monitor within their account all chargers they've installed and then have another level of technical support without having to have the costly process of having to actually send out an installer. It's invaluable for us, really.
Fantastic. Maybe we could double down quickly on one of the features. It was mentioned earlier, the sort of load control. I know we have a lot of installers in the room that probably will be very aware of sort of like load restrictions typically at sort of larger installs, but then also like people from the government maybe who sort of haven't been sort of exposed to that yet. Could you speak quickly about sort of like some of the limitations that you typically face when installing a larger site?
Exactly. I mean, for a site like this, although obviously Westfield is a fairly new shopping centre with quite extensive infrastructure, it's still a huge task that 4 stories underground to bring in 19 charge points. Along with this is just phase 1, so there's further expansion to bring in 3-phase 22 kilowatt chargers. There's also Tesla down there that have got charge stations. So it is a big ask to really work around something that's already built and underground. The load balancing thing for us is a big part. Again, 19 charge points, they need to be talking to each other. Some other charger manufacturers have that built in. We do have that feature, but then to actually manage it through the platform Pando itself, again, is a great asset for us.
Yeah. So something as well that's interesting is that sort of the platform allows different charge point operators, also different chargers to sort of be load managed on the same site. So you're no longer sort of restricted to sort of one charger manufacturer's proprietary sort of load management system. When it comes to sort of load management, another thing I wanted to mention, but it slipped my mind now. Maybe we can talk about some of the smart charging regulations.
Definitely. So we launched in March of 2022. At that point, we were obviously aware of the July or end of June, 30th of June, smart rigs coming in, which was a massive step up for ourselves and the whole EV charger market. Although we had an app that we developed, being brutally honest, it wasn't very user friendly and wasn't great. So it was just a tick box exercise for us to say, wait a minute, we not only have got a great platform to offer our customers with smart charging and everything else, we're also going to become fully smart rigs compliant, which that again was because of EV, our integration with ev.energy. Again, with the December regs coming in, a huge element of that was covered by our integration and the fact that we're powered by ev.energy. So, the growth was accelerated with slightly less work from our side because the app and the platform we were already using met most of those requirements.
Yeah. Okay. Joe, well, thanks so much for joining us. Feel free to take a seat, and then we'll continue the conversation during the Q&A and thereafter. One thing that we would like to do today is sort of like thank you all for coming out and sort of to celebrate the launch of this new product. We sort of have an event day offer. We are looking, basically the first 10 people that are sort of signing up today will get sort of free licenses for our shared EV charging product. If you scan the code on the screen, we'll be able to give you access to Pando, as well as sort of
give you access to these free licenses. So I'm very much looking forward to sort of getting a lot of you sort of connected and going on Pandom. Before we sort of jump into the Q&A session, I would like to sort of take a step back and think a bit about sort of the future. We heard a lot about sort of where we're going with regards to sort of smart charging regulations, but actually there's another set of regulations that come into play, which are the building regulations. I'm very glad that we have sort of an expert in the room today. Please allow me to welcome on stage James Clarke, who is the CEO of JPL. James, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Lucas.
James, you are in a unique position that you started off working in the building space, and you recently decided to start a charger company, a charger manufacturer company. Tell us a bit about that motivation.
Well, the motivation is that because the regulations is coming into effect this year and the regulations that come at the end of the year, we decided to have a totally new, completely new, fresh look at it, from looking at the available market, which is substantial. So it's a forced market, and what can we do that's slightly different? What can we look from the pain side? So we look from the installer side first to try and deal with the pains that the installer can have and give a completely different experience. And then, effectively, the user side of things. So our approach was quite different. We looked at what's on the market first, and then we forgot that. So the people who helped me on the design side of this product, I wanted them to start with a completely clean white piece of paper and start from fresh. So it's quite a different concept. It is to my left. It's on the little pillar that we've actually put up on my left-hand side, if anyone wants to have a little look at what our concept is all about.
Wonderful. And I understand that that product will be launching later on this year. What we find really fascinating with you and your company is that sort of you have all the building regulations sort of in mind, and sort of due to these regulations, you actually saw a big opportunity sort of starting that charger business. Could you tell us a bit about both the building regulations as well as the opportunity that you see?
This is the bit I'm going to read to you, because I'm probably going to get this wrong otherwise. So let me simplify it. The building regulations I'm talking to is Part S, that effectively, as Joe said, came into effect 15th of June 2022. What this really means is any new build or renovation, commercial or residential, where parking spaces are provided, needs to have access to or include an EV charger. Properties must have a minimum number of EV chargers that equal the number of parking spaces that have access to chargers equal the number of dwellings. Whatever it is, the lower. Any build that starts after the 15th of June 2023, this year, is also caught up in that policy. Let's sort of put some numbers behind that for everybody. So I'm quoting at the moment from the Department of Levelling 2021, which is a government document. In 2021, we can go back further, we had approximately 334,000 applications on new builds. Last year was slightly down. We made 280,000 applications last year. Let's say we're hovering around about the 300,000 units. On top of that, you've also got extensions. So you can argue numbers comfortably getting towards 500,000 units a year. 500,000 units a year, let's just keep the maths really simple, and let's say the average cost of an install at the moment, including cabling, the unit, let's call it £1,000. You're now looking at a bit of a forced industry that's getting something close to £500 million a year. And that's a brand new industry that we're looking at. That's before you start talking about other reasons to buy EV chargers, car purchases, second-hand car purchases, etc., etc. So the size of the market that we're now looking at is a brand new market that's really coming into effect right now, has got to be interesting. And that's why I think speed of install comes into effect, and looking at trying to make the install experience easier, less expensive for them as well in certain things that we try to do, and to try and make the user experience as easy as possible.
I think that's where we're very much aligned, your company and ev.energy, with this sort of aim to make the installation experience as simple as possible. And while you were quoting these numbers, I saw some sort of audience members, especially those sort of involved in building chargers, nodding, because it's such an exciting moment in time for us at the moment, where we're sort of living through the transition from the residential charging into the more commercial charging. As sort of the electric vehicle adoption comes into the big cities, we suddenly are faced with a whole new set of problems, which is what triggered us at ev.energy to sort of build out Pando and sort of build out a solution for that. So yeah, very excited to see your charger being launched later this year.